Welcome to Order Militarist Radio TV. We here are lifelong Catholics, and what we do is for free in the love of Jesus Christ and of His Holy Mother Church. And we will defend our Holy Mother, the Church. And when you support us by donating either one time or monthly, it all goes back into equipment. And so this way we can give you unbiased, hard-hitting news and facts that isn't controlled by political correctness or interest groups. And we welcome Brother Alexis Bonello to the show. And we found some amazing details about Israel.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on Order Militaris Radio TV, especially for our monthly program on terrorism and the persecution of Christians. And before we begin our program today, I want to point
Oh, right on time, boys, right on time. Okay, you can free him up. Talking to our censors here. Yeah.
Okay, as I was saying, what was the last thing you heard me say?
You're about to explain something.
Oh, really? Okay. Boy, I want to explain something. We are, here at Order Militaris Radio TV, we are information service sponsored by Order Militaris Catholicus, an international association of Catholics for the defense of Christians who are being persecuted. And consequently, we're going to give you the facts. We're not a station to listen to if you think by your gut or by your pants. We're a station you think of by your mind. So if you're in any way intellectually controlled, psychologically controlled, culturally controlled, so that you don't think, you just go along with the majority of opinion or sentiment or feelings that are out there, you're going to be very shocked by what you hear on this station, because we're going to just read you the facts that are in open public databases and connect the points. And you'll see how controlled you are and your whole world is by the Masonic Lodge and the enemies of Christ. And some people can't bear to see that. They prefer to live in a make-believe world that is all rosy and fine, and that there is no devil and there are no enemies of Christ, and things just go bad because things just happen. And the idea that there is a Masonic Lodge that's working to overthrow humanity and slave us all to Satan, they consider a fairy tale, even though the Masons say openly in all their publications that this is what they're up to. So I'm going to say that as a preference that we're going to talk about today, because we are going to shatter one of the biggest propaganda lies of the 20th century with just hard facts. And it's going to shock a lot of Protestants or even Catholics in America, because you've heard the big lie, and now we're going to disassemble the big lie. And it all starts with the fact that a war of genocide is being waged against Armenians now by 2 Islamic states. And they're using the most advanced drone technology to constantly blow up individual soldiers or military formations or tanks or trucks of the Armenian army. And neither Turkey nor Azerbaijan has this technology. This is advanced technology developed by the United States. How did they get it? And AJ has done the investigation, and you're going to hear some amazing things. I'm going to follow the breadcrumbs, and we're going to lead back to a theme that we've already brought up.
Yep. Folks who make the suicide drones that you're seeing on Twitter and all social media that Armenians report news about what's going on there. The suicide drones are created by the Israeli Aerospace Industries. Now, their founder, an American citizen turned Israeli citizen, Al Schwimmer, He was born June 10th, 1917. He died June 10th, 2011. He was born in New York City, New York, the son of immigrants from Eastern Europe. Schwimmer never used his given birth name of Adolf, preferring the nickname Al. So he began his aerospace career in 1939 at Lockheed Martin Corporation as an engineer and also received a civilian pilot license. During World War II, he worked for TWA and assisted the U.S. Air Transport Command as a flight engineer. During the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, Schwimmer used his World War II experience and his contacts to smuggle surplus warplanes to Israel. Schwimmer reflected on what motivated these actions in an interview with Bose DeVere. The alternative was described as a second Holocaust to believe that those 600,000 Jews were going to die. Using circuitous routes, he also recruited the pilots and crews to fly the planes to Israel. Many of these men became the nucleus of the Israeli Air Force. In 1949, Schwimmer returned to the United States, and in 1950, he was convicted in the United States of violating the U.S. Neutrality Acts for smuggling the planes into Israel. Schwimmer was stripped of his voting rights and veteran benefits and fined $10,000, but did not receive a prison sentence. Schwimmer refused to ask for a pardon, believing that smuggling weapons to help create Israel was the right moral decision to make. In 2001, President Bill Clinton gave Schwimmer a presidential pardon. In the early 1950s, Schwimmer was running an aircraft maintenance company in Burbank, California, and was approached by David Ben-Gurion, Israel's then prime minister, who asked Schwimmer to return to Israel and establish an aircraft company for commercial and military purposes. Schwimmer acceded to Ben-Gurion's request and founded Israel's Aerospace Industries, of which he became the first CEO. Schwimmer was one of the founders of Savon, but later moved to Tel Aviv. In the mid-1980s, Schwimmer was special advisor for technology industry for Israel's then Prime Minister Shimon Peres, who became a close friend.
So Adolf Schwimmer, that
Mm-hmm.
sounds to me like a German name.
Mm-hmm.
Does it say anything about his wife?
Let's see here.
Just so that we round out the picture of who he was and what he came from. He comes from New York. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Schwimmer's wife is Rena. They have 2 children, Danny and Dafina, and 4 grandchildren, or Ela, Sarah, and Avi. On June 10, 2011, Schwimmer died on his 94th birthday in a hospital in Ramat Gan, Tel Aviv district, Israel.
He has a child born on June 10th.
No, that's when he died.
Oh, that's when he died. So now it doesn't say where she's from, does it?
Mm.
Okay. So this is interesting. So German name, Jewish, New York City, 1912.
Yeah.
So that means, does it say when he married his wife?
Nope.
Okay. So he's in the generation they would have been marrying in the 30s. Okay. So that's Schwimmer, and that's Israeli Aerospace Industries. But in particular, the drones, the suicide drones, are being made by a company that has another name.
Yep. Lockheed. So, Israel Aerospace Industries with a man from Lockheed Martin. And still, when they first took off and became very popular in the early 70s and 80s, guess you came a knocking for, oh, we're very interested in what you're doing over here. United States.
So what is this? Can we name some names here?
Let's see here. See who we got for its names.
Maybe we should start with Ben-Gurion, because most people
Yeah.
who are not Jewish have heard that name, but don't really know who he is.
Okay. Okay, he's the real man who founded the modern state of Israel, David Ben-Gurion.
And was that the name he was born with?
Let's see here.
Because the Jews have a habit of changing their names several times in their lifetime.
He was born. Yep, David Ben-Gurion was born in Polonsk in the Congress, Poland, then part of the Russian Empire. His father, Ben-Gurion, was a lawyer and leader of the Soviet Zion movement. His mother, Shinno, died when he was 11 years old. Ben-Gurion's birth certificate found in Poland in 2003 indicated that he had a twin brother who died shortly after birth. At the age of 14, his two friends formed the youth club, Ezra, promoting Hebrew studies and immigration to the Holy Land. In 1905, he was a student at the University of Warsaw. He joined the Social Democratic Jewish Workers' Party. Socialist.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a long name. Socialist Democrat. It could be, yeah, we don't know if you could say it's communist or Nazi. Socialist was both back then. It's interesting that his brother who shared the womb with him died shortly after birth. That's not really a good statement of character, but he goes, so he's a Polish Jew, I should say a Jew from Poland.
Yeah.
Or what does he do in life? How does he get to be the founder of Israel?
Okay, he goes from, in 1906, he immigrated to the Ottoman Mosav Soviet of Jerusalem. A month later, he was elected to the Central Committee of the newly formed branch of Polis Zion in Jaffa, becoming chairman of the Platform Committee. He found a job picking oranges in Petah Tikva, and moved to kibbutz in Galilee in 1907, where he worked as an agricultural laborer. The following year, he joined an armed watchmen's group on 12th April 1909, following attempted robbery in which an Arab from Kafar, Canada was killed. Ben-Gurion was involved in fighting during which Lingard and a farmer from Shezra were killed. So he worked his way up. On November 7, 1911, Ben-Gurion arrived in Thessalonica in order to learn Turkish for his law studies. The city, which he had large Jewish community, impressed Ben-Gurion, who called it a Jewish city that had no equal in the world. Some of the city's Jews were rich businessmen and professors, while others were merchants, craftsmen, and porters. In 1912, he moved to Constantinople to study law at Istanbul University. Together with Yitzhak Ben-Zvi, he adopted the Hebrew name Ben-Gurion after the Jewish leading figure Yosef Ben-Gurion from the Great Jewish Revolt against the Romans. He also worked as a journalist. Ben-Gurion saw the future as dependent on the Ottoman regime.
So Ben-Gurion isn't his given name.
Nope. They don't
But
tell.
they don't tell you his original name. That's very interesting. Was it Polish or German? Okay, we'll have to check that in other sources. But okay, so he goes to study law in Turkey.
So Ben-Gurion was living in Jerusalem at the start of the First World War, where he and Ben-Zvi recruited 40 Jewish into the Jewish militia to assist the Ottoman army. Despite this, he was deported to Egypt in March 1915. From there, he made his way to the United States, where he remained for 3 years. On his arrival, Ben-Zvi went on a tour of 35 cities in an attempt to raise a pioneer army, the Hekalaluts, of 10,000 men to fight on Turkey's side. After Balfour's declaration of November 1917, the situation changed dramatically in 1918. Ben-Gurion, with the interest of Zionism in mind, switched sides and joined the newly formed Jewish Legion of the British Army. He volunteered for the 38th Battalion Royal Fusiliers, one of the four which constituted with the Jewish Legion. His unit fought against the Turks as a part of the Chateau's force during the Palestine campaign, though he remained in a Cairo hospital with dysentery. Okay. So he comes back to New York in 1915 in New York City. He met a Russian-born Paula Moonwis, and they married in 1917. Keep New York City in your mind, folks. He'll come back. So they married in 1917. The couple had 3 children, a son, Amos, 2 daughters, Julia Ben Zizer, Renea Lisham. Already pregnant with their first child, Amos married Mary Cowell, an Irish Gentile, and although Reform Rabbi, Joachim Prince converted her to Judaism soon after. Neither the Palestinian rabbinate nor her mother-in-law, Paula Ben-Gurion, considered her a real Jew, until she went in Orthodox conversion many years later. Amos became Deputy Inspector General of the Israel Police and also Director General of the textile factory. He and Mary had 6 granddaughters from their 2 daughters and a son, Alon, who married a Greek Gentile. Jalula had 2 sons and a daughter, and Renea, who worked as a microbiologist at the Israel Institute for Biological Research, and had a son. And then finally, the Zionist leadership starts, and then the Arab revolt. Excuse me. After the death of Theodorus Borchov, the left wings and centrist of Polei Zion split in February 1919 with Ben-Gurion and his friend Burl Katz-Nielsen leading centrist faction of the labor Zionist movement. The moderate Polei Zion formed Adut Havovada with Ben-Gurion as leader in March 1919. In 1920, he assisted in the formation of the Histadrut, the Zionist Labor Federation in Palestine, and served as its general secretary from 1921 until 1935. Ahadut Havad's Third Congress, held in 1924 in Herod, Shlomo Kaplanski, a veteran leader of the Polei Zion, proposed that the party should support the British Mandatory Authorities' plan for setting up an elected legislative council in Palestine. He argued that a parliament, even with Arab majority, was the way forward. Ben-Gurion, already emerging as the leader of the Yishuv, succeeded in getting Kaplanski's idea rejected. Okay. In 1930, Hapoel Hatzar, founded by A.D. Gordon in 1905, and Hadut Havavoda joined forces to create Mapai, the more moderate Zionist Labor Party. It was still a left-wing organization, but not as far left as other factions under Ben-Gurion's leadership. In the 1940s, the left wing of Mapai broke away to form Mapim. Labor Zionism became the dominant tendency in the World Zionist Organization. And when the 1936-1939 Arab revolt in Palestine broke out, Ben-Gurion instigated a policy of restraint in which the Haganah and other Jewish groups did not retaliate for Arab attacks against Jewish civilians, concentrating only on self-defense. In 1937, the Peel Commission recommended partitioning Palestine into Jewish and Arab areas. Ben-Gurion supported this policy. This led to a conflict with Zevi Jablonski, who opposed partition, and as a result, Jablonski supported split with the Haganah and abandoned Havagah, the house where he lived from 1931 on, and for the part of each year after 1953, is now a historic house museum in Tel Aviv, the Ben-Gurion House in 1946. Ben-Gurion and North Vietnam's Politburo chairman Ho Chi Minh became very friendly when they stayed at the same hotel in Paris. Ho Chi Minh offered Ben-Gurion a Jewish home in exile in Vietnam. Ben-Gurion declined, telling Ho Chi Minh, "I am certain we shall be able to establish a Jewish government in Palestine."
So Ben-Gurion is like this with the left, and he was born in New York just in the same years that Harriman was funding Trotsky. The Masonic were funding the left-wing Jews who brought down the Russian Empire. So that's very interesting. That's Ben-Gurion. And for people to understand, Zionism is a movement created and thought of by atheist, godless Jews. They're Jews by race or by claim of a race. They're not Jews according to the Old Testament definition of a Jew. Moses wouldn't consider them Jews at all. He would consider them apostates. But they are closely allied with international Marxism. And as we mentioned in our show, the Masonic banks in New York created Marxism as a political entity that governs nations. So that's Ben-Gurion. Now, the company, I've seen in news reports that these drones that are Israel is shipping en masse to Azerbaijan to conduct this war are made by a company called Raphael.
Yeah.
What is this company and who's behind it?
Raphael Advanced Defense Systems. The main man behind this is Shlomo Gur. He was the founding member of the Kibbutz Tel Amah. He is credited with creating and then managing the construction of 57 tower and stockade settlements during the 1936-39 Arab revolt in Palestine. Following the establishment of the State of Israel, he was project manager of the Hebrew University, the National Library, and the Knesset. And in the summer of 1936, he expanded the Arab revolt, endangered the Jewish population, blah, blah, blah. He was also the first director of Israel's military research department. That is all they have at Wikipedia on this guy. But I looked around and searched his name. In 1992, he was a member of the Washington Institute Improving the Quality of the U.S. Middle East Policy.
So he's the head of a arms company, and that's improving U.S. military policy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they spend all this time watching Order Militaris. Can you imagine? Okay, so
and he also helped found this thing called Nerd David in 1936, with the help of the socialist, Zionist, secular Jewish youth movement.
And what is Nerd David? A settlement?
It's a very it's the tower and stockades settlements in Tel Amal, but it's now a very seclusive resort type area for special people.
Oh well, so yeah, they start as communists and all living together, sharing the poverty of one another, and they end up as exclusive elitist capitalists. Isn't that so wonderful? Communists are so morally consistent. So, but this group, why would he be working with them? We know he's left-wing because he comes from a kibbutz, and that means he's a Marxist, a socialist. But what's the name of this youth group again, and where was it founded?
The Socialist, let's get the right name. The Socialist Zionist Secular Jewish Youth Movement, or in the shorter version, the Hashamar Hatzir, was founded in 1913 in Galicia, in the Austria-Hungary Empire.
Galicia is southeast Poland, what we call southeast Poland today, and parts of the Ukraine. So it's a Polish socialist kind of youth group, but socialist youth groups were very militant and in their inception. What was this one involved in, and do we know much about it?
Yeah, they were learning the works of Sigmund Freud, the psychoanalyst, was also an influence. partly through Siegfried Bernfeld, was an Austrian psychologist, and so was the philosopher Martin Buber. Otto Finchnell also supported the Hashemar-Hatzar efforts to integrate Marxism with psychoanalysis. Hashemar-Hatzar's education sought to shape the image of the child from birth to maturity. Some were aware of the work of the Soviet educator Anton Makarenko, who also propounded the collectivist education.
Okay, so the skilled in psychological manipulation, and even so far as to manipulate children. Most people don't know that the Zionist project in Israel was to found communes, which were called kibbutzes, where they tried to practice good psychology to make themselves live in harmony, but they ended up at each other's throats because it's completely fake religion. And they ended up becoming a just grubby capitalist. Who are some other people involved? Well, who's the founder of Raphael military?
Okay, let's see. The founder was Shlomo Gur, the guy behind Near David.
Okay,
and member of the socialist this thing.
So this is a very left-wing organization. And who are some other prominent people in this corporation? And
first, they were also part of the. They were also part of the. They were also part of the Hashmer Hatzir and Lot. Abraham Genswich, on the other hand, formed the Jewish Nazi Collaboration Network Group 13, also known as the Jewish Gestapo, in December 1940, active in Warsaw Ghetto. He was also the leader of the infamous Gestapo-sponsored Jewish organization, Zagwith, which was formed in February 1943 at the beginning of the Warsaw Uprising. So they have connections to the Nazis there.
That was who was he? One of the directors of the company?
Just one of the members of the socialist groups in Poland. He was one of the
group.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that wasn't the last of the Nazi officers. The SS officer Otto Sorzini and Otto Sorini was one of the most outstanding military men of the 20th century. His specialty was daring, guerrilla-style commando raids. He was an unrepentant Nazi, a senior SS officer, remained involved in right-wing causes his whole life. And he also became an agent of the Mossad, Israeli intelligence services, and also became a hitman.
So it might seem in the accepted narrative, the Nazis were the enemies of the Jews, and because they were racist Germans, and the Jews were completely innocent and had nothing to do with it. That's the accepted narrative. The actual history is Hitler's 4 grandparents were all Jews. He was 100% Jewish, and though it's claimed 6 million people died, 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust, the only really hard evidence documentation is Red Cross death certificates, and it puts it around 250,000. Okay, and that's death certificates requested by Jews for their parents or relatives who died in the Holocaust so that they could claim inheritance. Okay, so it's a very necessary thing to have a death certificate. It's not something you would omit doing if you had someone who died who's a relative, because that's the only way you could obtain their inheritance or legal rights. So, but what most of us are never told is that more than 130,000 Jews served in the Nazi military machine, intelligence apparatus, and political party. 130,000. Now, they weren't all pure Jews. Some of them were half Jews, like their father was a Gentile and their mother was a Jew, or their father was a Jew and their mother's a Gentile. But nevertheless, they would be considered Jews by most modern definitions. Not using we're using more of a racial definition or ethnic definition or genetic definition than a religious one.
Yep.
I'm not saying at all that they practice the Jewish religion. That's something quite different. Neither did anyone in the kibbutzes. Okay. So I have, we've already seen from our investigations that whereas in the accepted narrative, Nazi Germany is defeated, it's crushed, and it just overnight ceases to exist. There's still some Nazi criminals that wander the world and Jews hunt them down and they've been caught. And there's a denazification program in Germany because the Germans are the Nazis and they're only in Germany for the most part. But we found that the entire Nazi spy apparatus and most of their scientific experts were all recruited by the US after the war. So they actually escaped the war. They didn't suffer the consequences. They got jobs afterwards. Is it possible that the Israeli state, which is founded in 47, more or less, just 2 years after the war, is not founded by the Jews who were the victims of the Holocaust, but were in fact is the 130,000 Jews that worked for the Nazi state and escaped and founded the state of Israel so they could continue a Jewish Nazi state? Okay, that's his operative hypothesis. So that's the case. We should see that the modern state of Israel would have connections with the Nazis, or the fact that they would hire a Nazi, the fact that Mossad would hire an SS agent who murdered people is just beyond belief if the state of Israel exists as a bulwark against the persecution of Jews. That's did you uncover other connections between the modern state of Israel and the Nazis, or maybe with the Masonic bankers in New York who supported the Nazis?
Yeah, this guy, Reuven Shiloh.
Okay, Reuven Shiloh. So, but is that the name he was born with?
No. Reuven Zelensky.
Okay, so born. It sounds Polish, Zelensky.
But then he shortened it, Zelani.
And then it ends up changing it to Shiloh. So he had three names. For us Christians, someone who has three names in life already puts a question mark on their life. But let's talk about the life of Reuben Zelensky.
Yeah.
Learn something about him.
All this is facts and dates and actual military notes that are now public domain about this man. This is not Wikipedia. This is actual intelligence work that is now public domain that I found on this man. He was born in December 1909 as Reuven Zelensky. He was educated in the Tachmoni school, then went in 1928. He went to the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Now, while studying at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, Reuven Zelani, he shortened his name by then, who had become close to Yitzhak ben Tziv, his wife, Rahel Yanet, and Dov Oz, Moshe Zertok, and Eliezer Golem, was recruited by Dov Oz for intelligence missions on behalf of the Yashuv. He's already in intelligence right now in college.
And what does he do after he graduates from Hebrew University?
3 years later, he joins the military in 1925. In 1925, Avram Tahumi was appointed deputy commander of the Jerusalem district Haganah. In 1929 and 1931, he served as district commander. He served under Yitzhak ben Ziv. Now, he was another event note. Gideon Ruther Raphael was recruited into the Haganah by Eliezer Golem, one of the friends from college. Now, in 1932, Reverend Solani served as a secret messenger. His first mission was a messenger for the department to Iraq, visiting the University of Baghdad under the guise of a teacher of Hebrew and Oriental Studies, where he was to report on the situation of Iraqi Jews and the state of British and Iraqi assessments of the situation in Israel. How could he know Hebrew so well with barely any schooling, because he was already made a spy?
Well, they probably in the kibbutzes, I think they spoke Hebrew. So if anyone, when people claim to be teachers of a language, that doesn't mean necessarily they're experts in it. And I don't think modern Hebrew is classical or biblical Hebrew by anything. It's kind of like a form of Yiddish, which is what was spoken by the Ashkenazi in Germany. But I can't testify that to exactly because it's outside my familiar studies. So, and what does he go on after becoming a spy for this Jewish organization in Baghdad?
He still is a spy. In 35, he returns back to Baghdad, now undercover as a journalist for the Palestine Post, develop links with the Kurds.
Way back then. And then in 36, he does something that is kind of surprising.
I told you New York's going to come back, folks. He married in 1936. Does not give a date, does not give a location, but in New York. Because this lady, Betty Borden, a family of English descent all the way back in the Norman period, arrived in New England and Rhode Island in the 1635 era.
So he marries Betty Borden, and we know the Bordens are a family that are part of the Skull and Bones. And 1936, I mean, here's a guy who spent his whole life in Jerusalem, Israel, and Middle East, and all of a sudden he goes to New York and marries a girl. Well, maybe she had visited Israel and got to know her there, and he came back for the family or something of that sort. But that's very interesting because a devout Jew would marry a Jewess because otherwise his children wouldn't be Jews. So we assume she's Jewish. She's using a Gentile name, but it doesn't sound like it. So his career now takes off, doesn't it?
Yeah. Now, after he marries this woman, he removes Zelani and changes his name to Reuven Shalok, which is English Shiloh. But Shiloh in Hebrew means messenger or sending out. So he's telling everyone he's a spy.
To a Jew would understand it.
Yeah.
A Jew would say, I'm a spy. Okay. That's how proud he was of it. And so what does he start doing?
He joins the diplomatic action in March 1948. Now they still in the actual records they still call him Reuven Zelani, even though he's changed his name. He was sent. So from 1936, Reuven Zelani served in the political department of the Jewish Agency and was sent to intelligence gathering missions in Lebanon and Syria. He was also responsible for relations with British intelligence agencies, MI5, MI6, all those agencies, while at the same time promoting the potential of ties with the United States in relationship with the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, which we know becomes the CIA.
Now, the OSS in 48 or maybe even 46 is recruiting the entire Nazi spy network.
Yep.
What would he on earth have anything to do with them? But we do know this, and we reported in the show that the OSS and the Nazi spy network were merged into a new organization by a Skull and Bones member, and that new organization is the CIA. So here we have a man who starts working for or with side-by-side Nazis.
Now, In December 1947, still in the official records, they don't call him Shiloh yet. In 1947, Reuven Zeleny becomes assistant on intelligence affairs for David Ben-Gurion, the guy who founded the modern state of Israel.
So here we have a connector action between the CIA and the modern state of Israel.
Mm-hmm. And was appointed head of state, military, and political division in the foreign ministry.
Okay, so you can't get in a bigger power position than that as a CIA agent. And you know, how would he become a CIA agent unless his wife, who's evidently from New York City, had some strings to pull for him in the United States?
Mm-hmm.
And as I say, Borden family is a Skull and Bones family, and then he's working for a Skull and Bones organization known as the CIA. So I think it's pretty obvious. It's kind of strange he picks up English along the way, but English is a lot easier than Hebrew. So, and Jews are intelligent people, so that's not so surprising. So what does he go on to do from there?
So on his trip to London in 1948, again, they still call him Zeleny in their records, concluded that Britain did not oppose the partition, meaning the creation of Israel.
Mhm.
Then on December 13, 1949, David Ben-Gurion tasked, now they call him Shiloh, Reuven Shiloh, was establishing and running a new department for centralized and coordinated intelligence activities. On April 1st, 1951, Reuven Shiloh was put in charge of the intelligence services for Mossad.
So Mossad basically is CIA extension society. Mm-hmm. And we haven't reported this, but it's widely reported that all the military hardware that the Jewish Zionists used to conquer the Palestine state in the 47 war was all gotten from the U.S. through the U.S. government, which at that time was controlled by Skull and Bones, because they were Secretary of War under Roosevelt. So if Skull and Bones Bank, Brown Brothers Harriman, recruited, funded, financed, supported, and was paid back in gold by Hitler and the entire Nazi state, and they founded the CIA by saving the Nazi spy organization that they themselves had funded and created. And this guy, Reuven Shiloh, is their man in Israel founding Mossad and creating the new Israeli state. Then it's really hard to exclude as something very probable to consider that the entire Jewish Nazi spy network, or Wehrmacht, those 130,000 who survived the war, are in fact the ones who founded the modern state of Israel. And the modern state of Israel is not a Jewish state, it's a Nazi state. Just hiding under the cover of the whole narrative control that's been going on that Hitler was a German and that the Nazis were about killing Jews primarily, which isn't what they were about. They were about controlling economies for the Masonic banks in New York. And what does he go on to do after he's in Mossad? Where does Raphael Corporation come along? When does he found that?
That they don't put in their official records.
Mm-hmm. But it's under the record of the company itself?
Mm-hmm.
And Raphael is this corporation that is making suicide drones that the Azerbaijanis are using to bomb Christians in Armenia with complete tacit approval of Trump and Turkey, and there's no one even objecting to it.
Not even not just the drones, but the cluster munitions or cluster bombs.
This same company, Raphael, is the manufacturer of cluster bombs, a banned munition.
Mm-hmm.
And cluster bombs, for people who don't know, are anti-personnel weapons. So when a cluster bomb falls, it blows up, sending out little bombs all over that then blow up and spread shrapnel everywhere. So it's designed to cause the highest amount of personal physical damage in among humans in the bombed zone. And we've seen Azerbaijan's using these in neighborhoods in Stepnakert, capital of the Artsakh Republic, and Nagorno-Karabakh. This is a really vicious weapon, and this is the kind of something that Nazis use. But Trump's absolutely silent about it. And here we've now connected the dots between Brown Brothers Harriman, the CIA, the Mossad, Rafael Corporation, which is selling cluster bombs and drones to Azerbaijan that's bombing Armenia, while Trump is silent about it, whose father got money from Brown Brothers Harriman.
Yep.
So I think I don't think I have to say why Trump's being silent about it. I think it's pretty evident there. So do we have any more information on, have we rounded out now our report on the Nazi associations, or actually underpinnings of the modern Israeli state?
Yeah, but there's one little piece of information. His death, Reuven Solani's death, was in 1959. During that era, Gregory Carpenter, who did the awesome report on the truth behind the Kennedy assassination, noted that during that time, the CIA developed a special type dart pistol, which shot a dart of some sort of chemical that would go into the heart, that would simulate a heart attack and kill the person and leave no trace. But I can't say if that was what his heart attack was that Reuven Solani died from, or it could have been a natural one.
Okay, but he died at the age of only what? He died in what year? 50?
59, and he died at the age of 49. Pretty young.
That's pretty young. That is pretty young. Yeah, that sounds suspicious, because he helps Israel come into being. So he knows all the dirty secrets about how Israel came into being. Best way to get rid of that.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way these people think. So I know the Palestinians have said for decades that Israel is a Nazi state and they're racist just like Nazis, and I've always dismissed it. But I'm shocked to find so many things connecting the modern state of Israel with the Nazis and with Masonic banks who are known to support Nazis, and organizations that are completely composed of Nazis, and at the same time now selling bombs to blow up Christians, just as a Nazi would do. I think this is a really compelling report that should make Christians in the West to open eyes up and lay aside this propaganda that says Israel's our best ally in the Mideast, because in that phrase "our," O-U-R, it might not mean America. It might mean the Masonic lodges.
Yep. That's all I've found.
But that's excellent reporting, AJ. I don't think anyone has mentioned this in any Catholic media outlet in any language around the world, and I'm really proud of the research you've done. This is the kind of programs we do at Ordo Militaris Radio TV. We like investigative programs that connect the dots so you understand really what's going on in the world, and stop drinking the Kool-Aid of the manufactured propaganda, because the reality has to be covered by lies, because the reality is a lot less clean, let us say. And even if you're Jew out there and you're listening to this program, you should start asking questions. What is the modern state of Israel? Is it just a front of a Nazi organization known as the CIA and sponsored by the Masonic banks in New York who want a new world order, or is it really a state that cares about Jews for Jewish reasons?
Mm-hmm.
You should ask yourself. And I think Christians should realize that the propaganda we're hearing constantly in the United States that Christians should support Israel might just be more CIA propaganda trying to say Christians should support a Masonic project.
Mm-hmm.
And that's their constant propaganda, is they conceal what they're up to and try to get us to support their projects. And what Christians should be doing is supporting their own projects that want to restore Christ, the social Christ, Christian constitutions of nations, and Christian politics and Christian foreign policy. And you're not going to get that in any Masonic organization. They'll oppose it at every step. And that's why Christian Party for America is, I think, the only solution for the United States. And this project of building Christian parties, Catholic parties around the world, is the only hope left for mankind.
Yeah. So tomorrow we ain't done yet, folks. We're going to talk more about how to take down the deep state, especially their big handlers in New York
Okay.
for Christian politics.
Yeah, our weekly show on Christian politics on Tuesday, every Tuesday. This is our Monday show on terrorism. I want to add something because we're talking about the persecution of Christians. Italy, it's become crazy. So a lot of people might want to know. So I'll let you interview me, AJ, about what happened on Saturday.
So I saw you got arrested. What happened?
Yeah, so on Friday, the Catholics and I, who have been working for 5 months to organize a Catholic party in Italy, founded our party. In English, its title would be Italy for Italians. And it has that name because Italy is 98% a Catholic country, although not everyone practices or even believes. So no one knows what Christian politics means. So instead of calling it the Catholic Party of Italy or the Christian Party of Italy, because that would have no meaning, that'd be like saying we gave it a name that explains what we believe the faith of Christ requires us to stand for, and that is to make Italy be for Italians in the sense of opposing globalism, defending all that Italy's ever been as a Christian nation, a free nation, a prosperous nation with its own unique culture and civilization, and that governments should not be allied to foreign powers, but should serve the Italian people. And it's a party that opposes the Masonic Lodge. You can't be a Freemason if you're a member of the party, and you have to sustain its values. So on Saturday, I'm the president of the new party, and the secretary of the national committee sent me a text message to meet me. We had planned to meet in the Piazza del Popolo, and a few minutes after she texted me on my phone, which I hadn't on, it was in a bag I was carrying because I was handing out little leaflets of the party. And let me just show you 1 second. It says Italy for Italians and explains the party stands for liberty against the pandemic. And it has things like end the controls for the pandemic. There should be an effort to promote economic development, support for Italian families. There should be no manipulation of the concept of what a family is. There shouldn't be illegal immigration. There shouldn't be the violation of religious liberty of Christians. There shouldn't be any immunity from prosecution for all the things that went wrong in the so-called pandemic. And that there should be removal of taxes for people who have income under 50,000 euro. The sales tax, which is currently 23%, should go down to 5%. And there shouldn't be taxes on things like gasoline, electricity, water, and gas, because those are the points on the front of the brochure, though the program is much longer. So just a few minutes after the secretary of the National Council said, "I'm in the Piazza of Popolo, where are you?" I was arrested. The technical term, I was stopped. A whole bunch of state police who had been positioned about 30 yards from me for about 2.5 hours and saw that I wasn't wearing a mask, decided at that moment to arrest me. It was obviously to prevent my meeting with the secretary. We were going to hold a meeting of our national committee. And they said to me, "You're not wearing a mask."
Great work, Sherlock.
So I said, well, if someone has seen you for 3 hours, nearly 3 hours, not wearing a mask, and they come up to you and say, "You're not wearing a mask," what would you think?
What took you so long?
Yeah, it's obvious that they didn't react because I wasn't wearing a mask. Because if they had the habit of reacting to people who didn't have masks and writing a fine up for them, they would have written one up. But actually, it's been 7 months now I haven't worn a mask, and no one has ever written me up for it. And the police see me all the time without a mask because the police don't always enforce these laws. But just minutes after my secretary says, "I'm in the piazza, let's have our meeting," I'm arrested.
Yep.
So I said to them, oh, okay, I don't have a mask, but why should I be wearing a mask? And they said, well, you know, it's the law. I said, I don't know any law. What law is it? And they said, oh, well, it's a decree of the prime minister. In Italy, the prime minister is called the president of the ministry of the council of ministers. Okay, it's like president of the cabinet. He's not really called prime minister. He's called president of the cabinet. So he said that's a decree of the president of the prime minister. I said, well, then it's not a law, which is correct. It's not. It's an administrative ordinance. A decree of the prime minister in Italy is like an executive order in the United States, which is not a law. So I said, then it's not a law, it's an executive order. Well, they said, but nevertheless, you have to keep it. And I said, why do I have to keep it? No, they said, well, that's what's written in the Italian law, in the Constitution. You have to obey executive orders of the prime minister. I said, but isn't that based on the idea that there is a pandemic? And they go, of course, yes. But I said, isn't the idea that we should all be reacting to this pandemic based on a decree of the prime minister that says there is a state of emergency in Italy? Oh, yes, of course, it's a state of emergency. That's why we can do what we're doing. And then I said, well, you know, in the Italian Constitution, a state of emergency can be declared by the prime minister only for one reason. Do you know what reason that is? They were all silent. I said, don't you know what the reason is? Oh, it could be declared for any reason. The Constitution allows that. Well, I said, no, don't lie now. You know exactly what it says in the Constitution. It says solely if there is a military conflict on Italian soil, I mean a war, then there can be a state of emergency. So I said, is there a military conflict on Italian soil? And it took them 20 minutes to answer that question. And their leader came over, and about 10 policemen came over, and finally, and the plainclothesman came over, and he was filming it all. And finally, their head admitted that there was no war on Italian soil. Imagine it took 20 minutes for these guys to figure that out. Now, they're not stupid. Okay, so you can see where this is going. It has nothing to do with infection. Matter of fact, they were standing closer to me than social distancing allows. So if they were really concerned about a pandemic or actually believed it existed, they should have treated me as potentially infectious and stood at least at 2 meters away from me. They didn't do that. So I said, well, if there's no war, then they can't declare a state of emergency. And if you can't declare the state of emergency, then the decrees of the prime minister that are based on his assertion that he has declared a state of emergency have no validity in law. And therefore, you can't fine me or arrest me for not observing them. And they couldn't respond. They were like, finally, the leader said, the law here is what I say it is, and that's more important than the Constitution. I mean, is this even believable? It's like you're living in some kind of fantasy world. One guy said, but the Constitution was written in 48 and the Prime Minister's decree came out last week, so I'm going to observe the Prime Minister's decree because that's more recent. So I said, am I free to go? They go, no, you're being arrested for resisting a public official. I said, how am I resisting you? We asked you to see your document and you didn't give it to. I said, well, I would give you my document if you had a legal reason to ask for it. But since it just proved to you that you have no legal reason to ask for it, why should I give it to you? And then we talked some more and I said, you've asked me for my name. My name's Alexis Pugniello. Can I ask you your name? And one of the officers said, my name is Andrea Valeri. He's the one that stopped me. So I said, let's leave reasonably and peacefully and friendly, because I proved to you that what you wanted to do is illegal. So if you do it, you're going to violate my Constitution rights. Because in the Italian Constitution, you have the right of free speech, free movement, freedom of religion, and freedom to practice or express political opinions. And I was doing all those things at the time. So Andrea Valeri said, no, I have stopped you, and now you're going to be taken to the station, okay, because you have resisted a public official. I said, how have I resisted you again? I asked him again. He says, you didn't show me your identification. I said, well, you didn't ask for it. Here's my identification. So I gave them my Italian passport. They looked at it and they gave it back to me. At that point, they had no legal grounds to stop me because I hadn't resisted them. But then they're going to resist. They decided to arrest me anyhow for resisting a public official. I said, what did I resist you for? I gave you my name and I gave you my passport. after you explained to me that you were arresting me for no legal ground whatsoever and you're going to violate my constitutional rights. So they said, are you going to come quietly? I said, well, if you're a police following the law, I would come quietly. But since you're not, what can I say? I can't collaborate with you because as a Christian, I can't collaborate in your sin. They dragged me off, and you can read the rest of it at fromrome.info. I wrote an article about the New World Gestapo arresting me, and the rest is explained there. But it shows you that the pandemic has nothing to do with medicine. It's about political repression.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about persecuting Christians.
Yep. So, yeah. Please like and share this program, folks. I'll put a link to the article from Rome on what happened. It got a little worse from what I've read.
Yeah, it got a little worse. It went downhill from there, but thankfully I only have a bruise in my arm. It wasn't much worse than that. So,
So this is Order Militaris Radio TV signing off. Deus Volt.
Deus Volt.